Hey Eric, how's it going?
Not bad. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Uh,
Woo.
we're doing another kind of strange Sonic Boom Live today.
hmm
Episode 49, I think. Yep, episode 49. Uh, Today we're doing a pre-recorded version because I will be out of town on our normally live time frame. So pre-recorded, but it will be going live on YouTube at our regular time. So hopefully, if you enjoy this content, like, subscribe. But no live commentary on this episode today. But we will get back to you if you leave a comment. We'll just get back to you in non-real time. So Eric, you want to do our intro?
Sure. I'm Eric, and this is Justin, and we are Sonic Bloom Live. We every week do this show in particular, where we try to give a game industry insider's take on game industry news. And occasionally we'll bring people in to interview and sort of get developer perspective on things, and particularly what they're working on, what their interests in the industry are. But in general, we tend to pick three items that we think are either particularly interesting or otherwise might have some extra context that we think we can provide sort of insight into as to from um, why something may be sort of confusing from an outsider perspective, or that we have some other aspect that we think we can shed some light on.
Right.
So, but I think this week we have three items to cover.
Potentially four if you want to cover some rumor. I'll add that
Sure.
we try not to comment on rumors because they're unsubstantiated. There's a lot of people who um, can generate rumors from
Yeah.
little to nothing, and there's not a whole lot that validates it. So rumors, leaks, stuff like that, we tend not to talk about. But we'll talk about concrete industry news that we think has an impact on the industry as a whole.
And,
Um, there is
and
one item though that I thought we might mention briefly, at least put to bed.
sure. I will also suggest that you know don't look to necessarily to us for like insider secrets on the news items that we talk about.
No.
A lot of it is speculation on our part, but it's speculation that is backed by industry experience that like usually we'll try to invoke and provide you with details as to why we say the things that we do, where we see parallels to our own experience in the industry and try to. That's the type of context we're trying to provide.
Right, right. Like if it's marketing and because like I think both you and I have been part of marketing campaigns and the sort of language that goes along inside of studios when they're trying to announce titles.
Yeah.
Clever uses of language. We have to do our own marketing, and we still have to use clever uses of language, which hides certain details and will promote others.
hmm
And if you're kind of privy to that, you can kind of cut through certain statements that are given by, say, like CEOs or presidents of certain divisions that would, if you took at face value, would probably have a totally different meaning.
hmm
Um, Likewise, I think we both have experience in manufacture and production of video games, so what is a gold master candidate? What does a delay mean? That sort of thing. We can speculate on that with backed up from our experience in the industry.
Yeah, this is less of a coming at it and saying like, oh, they want to X, Y, or Z, and more of like we try to look at it and say, what are the industry like normal standard reasons they might be doing this, and
Right.
provide insight for that and say like, no, look, this could actually literally be a problem with such and such, and then go into it. So
Right.
anyway, what
All
are
right.
the three topics we have today, Justin?
Yeah. The three topics we have today is we'll be commenting or talking about an interview Tim Sweeney, who's the CEO of Epic, gave for Fast Company. It gives us more details about Epic's plan to enter the metaverse and the kind of metaverse that they see. So
hmm
we'll talk about that. I think it's particularly important because the metaverse is an emerging area of game development. Um, and it probably is going to change the industry as we know it if it's successful. So hearing Tim Sweeney talk about it will be quite enlightening, especially given their weight in the game industry as a company who creates one of the most popular game development engines. We'll also be talking about we've been covering quite a few discrimination and harassment cases throughout the game industry from all different parts of it, including console manufacturers and game publishers. Sony has its own now that we've found more information about. It's a gender discrimination lawsuit that's being leveled at them. We'll briefly talk about that as well. Just to keep things equitable, since we've talked about Nintendo's or labor dispute issues.
And Activision's, who are like, back in the limelight.
Yep. Which is a good segue into the last topic.
Yep.
Activision has been dealing not with just like the harassment suits that's had, but on top of that, they've had a unionization effort in kind of a result of the harassment suit. I think they're tied together as a catalyst for the unionization efforts going forward. We've covered the unionization efforts before by Ravensoft's QA team. There's kind of not quite a full closure on that, but we got closure to what was going on there and a resolution. I'm not sure if Activision can appeal further. So this may be like an official result of the unionization efforts by Ravensoft. And there was the last thing, which Eric sent to me as a tweet, but it was some information going around about like a next iteration of Xbox Series X Pro or whatever they want to call it, and
the mid-cycle refresh.
Right, mid-cycle refreshes. This is fully rumor territory, but since it's making the rounds and people will be passing this around, I figure we can just comment on it briefly as like a bonus topic.
Yep. Yeah, we'll try to get into it.
All right.
We can suss out.
Yeah.
All right.
So let's just jump right into it. Starting with Epic, formally starting the Metaverse, at least from a non-Roblox standpoint.
Perspective? Yeah.
So
disregarding Roblox. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
So Epic, through this interview with Fast Company, they effectively announced that they are going to be releasing an editor, the Unreal Editor, but specifically the version of the Unreal Editor with all of its mods and everything, for Fortnite. Right. And presumably the purpose for this is so that you can create and generate content for Fortnite, so that you won't need to have a special deal with Epic and have Epic's employees work on Fortnite, their own editor, and have you say, like, here's my 3D model and my animation, please import it into the game. You'll be able to do that all yourself. And presumably this will include some uploading mechanism, and they'll have a review stage and whatever. So effectively, they're trying to turn Fortnite itself into a platform where businesses can reach the player base, where you could sell to the players, no word on what this is going to look like. Here's where extrapolation is happening. But that presumably this is the purpose for it. There was a lot of sort of talking about building commerce and business in this platform and in this space. And Epic wants the Metaverse, Fortnite to be their Metaverse platform. And what Tim Sweeney was saying is that he sees a future where Roblox and whatever Facebook is building, or Meta is building, and Fortnite all share some sort of protocol where they can talk to each other and share content amongst one another. But that it's super, super early days for that. Right. But this is Epic's. We're drawing a line in the sand and on this content, and we're stepping over it ourselves to start driving this conversation.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about this too is that prior to this, we knew Epic was going to be a major contender in the Metaverse, not least of which was because Fortnite was shaping up to be something like that. But it wasn't clear if they were going to go lean full in on Fortnite, being like, look, the platform that we've already created, we can expand upon it, let it grow organically, and turn it into the Metaverse, or they're going to try to sort of do what I think Facebook is looking to do, where they're going to, from the ground up, build something that they think can be a Metaverse platform that people can expand upon. So this is a more or much more organic approach than Facebook or Apple or even PlayStation, who may or may not be doing their own metaverse entrance into the metaverse. I'd say
Yep.
this is how they're going to be approaching it. They're going organic, and they're branching it out of the player base that already exists in Fortnite.
So to be clear, Justin just dropped the names Apple and Sony, and what we're talking about there when we say their potential metaverse entries is Sony's revival of PlayStation Home, or possible revival thereof.
Yeah.
And for Apple, it's the long rumored AR goggles or glasses that they've been that the rumor mill keeps bringing up constantly. I mean, to an extent, it's fair because some images have leaked of sort of 3D space stuff, and they have AR kit and a bunch of other stuff. But
yeah, I mean, I think in the case of like name dropping Sony or like PlayStation and Apple, is because they haven't formally stated we're going to be doing a metaverse,
right?
But they are positioning themselves either through leaks and rumors or through certain approaches to their business that indicate that they may be preparing to do something there.
Mm-hmm.
But neither of them have said that they will. The only people who have are Facebook, Meta, Epic, and Roblox. Both Epic and Roblox are kind of organically growing it based off of Roblox platform, and Epic doing it from the Fortnite platform.
Right. Now, one of the really interesting things about the Fortnite platform that Tim Sweeney is talking about here is that a huge portion of the interview was dedicated to trying to tackle the App Store dominant player model that is going on right now. And what I mean by that is, Apple and Google stepped in and became basically a two-party behemoth. Duopoly, that's right, yeah. So that they control everything that happens on a mobile device. Whether it's Android or Apple, you have one option in both of the, reasonably one option in both of those. Because yes, there are other options if you go out of your way to do that on Android, but they are such a small fraction of the user base that whatever. And then on the broader tech space, we have Amazon and Microsoft also coming in, and basically there's a small group of huge companies, tech companies, that control the internet. Is sort of Tim Sweeney's look on this. And what he's come out and said in this interview is that they're trying to be an early entrance into the metaverse and prove that you can create an open space where Epic, as the person coming in to be the company that provides this foundation, isn't necessarily going to be a gatekeeper. If you want to have access to your customers and build something in that space, you're welcome to do it. And what that is going to look like legally is sort of an interesting, undefined space at this time. Justin, do you have thoughts on that?
I mean, no. It's hard to say exactly. Well, it's hard to say. I think what's more interesting is Sweeney's approach to it. Sweeney is looking at it and saying, look, tech has failed us in a lot of ways. As you pointed out, the Apple and Google duopoly, where you have to pay 30% of your revenues to a company that effectively does very little to actually help you be successful as a company or business. And it's their model of an economy is really not very functional. It requires tons and tons of money to dump into marketing dollars, and it's not even the best product rises. It's the loudest product rises in a lot of cases, which is the exact opposite from early on when the App Store had come out and people were able to create interesting apps and interesting things that were actually useful. And now it's flipped on its head, and I think Sweeney's looking at it and saying there's problems with this. There's problems with that, how that's happened, and the mobile platforms kind of broke from this. And he also talks about social media and social media's role in being an unregulated place, and that's also problematic. And he's looking to, as they grow the metaverse, that it will be this brand new economy, this brand new space that has aspects of social media, has aspects of app stores and everything else, all kind of under one larger umbrella. And he wants to be an early entrant to try to fight the issues that have arisen out of the tech space that has grown from like the early 2000s, mainly social media and app store usage. Whether or not he's successful, whether or not we have any right to believe he's successful is kind of, I don't know, but it's good to see that someone's acknowledging that there have been fundamental issues that are like society breaking in a lot of ways that he wants to attempt to avoid in their foot forward towards the metaverse.
Yeah, and a lot of this gets wound up into like a lot of Tim said a lot with very few words overall. Like he invokes a lot of the conversation that's been in the zeitgeist, at least if you pay attention to us. We've talked a lot about the Epic versus Apple and Epic versus Google background on our channel here in the past, and there's a lot of that being invoked. And you know, one of the aspects that also I don't think we've talked much about on our channel before, but is sort of the role of a private company sort of managing its own platform versus governments, and what amounts to free speech, and who gets to be the person that controls that in the space. Because all this is going to become a question in an open metaverse, right? Like if I'm entering through Fortnite, I have to abide by their terms of service. And I haven't personally reviewed in detail the Fortnite terms of service document, which I'm sure is this huge legal thing. That's not do whatever. It's a free country. Like it has very specific locks and ways to boot you from the service. So I'm sort of curious to see what will be and won't be allowed in this space, and what specifically, because there's a lot of big terms being thrown around in freedom and free speech and all this other stuff when we talk about this space. But at the end of the day, someone is going to need to be legally responsible for what happens in the space, or our governments, plural, because this isn't just something that's going to affect the U.S., where Justin and I are both based. You know, this is something that countries are going to have to come together and figure out, or at least on their own, what the laws are going to look like and how to prosecute or handle certain situations.
Right. I think at the very least, Sweeney's suggesting that he's conscious of the issues that exist, and that they do not want to fall in the same trap. And you can see at like a minimum the App Store policies towards like taking 30% of your earnings on the App Store. Like they already actively push against that in the Epic Store, and they take significantly less of what games sell for than what the App Stores do. And likewise in the asset stores for Unreal, they also take significantly less than other competing platforms do. So,
that's right.
You know, I can't say that what Fortnite will evolve into or what Epic's Metaverse will turn into, but at the very least, we're coming with a foot forward that says, you know, we're acknowledging these things exist, and we acknowledge that the state of technology is not in a good place. And there are things that need to be corrected. And now that we're opening up this brand new space and brand new area of economic growth, that we have to be more cognizant of the pitfalls that, you know, social media and app stores like kind of happily fell into. So I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting. Anything beyond that, I think is speculative because we don't really know what it'll turn into. But if anybody's a developer and looking to get in on making money, like you have 18 million Fortnite players that are
20. Something like 22 million.
I don't know. Their number fluctuates on what their simultaneous player count is, but
active players
that, you know. They're opening up the platform too, so that you can probably create your own digital assets and experiences that were otherwise personally created by like Epic and Fortnite. Like all the concerts and stuff like that were all done by in-house developers. Yeah, it's bespoke stuff, and now they're saying like, look, you can create your own now. So it should be interesting. It's an interesting new space that's opening up, and I think everybody should kind of be aware of it.
Yeah, Yeah, we'll see how it goes, but we're going to see a whole set of new services come online
Yep,
related to this.
sure will be.
Yeah, it'll be good. All right, so moving on to our second item.
Yep. Do you want me to? No, you.
Yeah, I did
Okay.
the last one. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So PlayStation is dealing with its own gender discrimination issues, allegations right now. This is actually a bit of a longer story, but I think in the context of the game industry, we've been seeing a lot of this lately. Activision, Ubisoft, EA, even going further back than that. Not necessarily gender discrimination, but harassment. Worker workers' rights and harassment, or discrimination. All these things kind of like bundled up into what is commonly seen as a toxic workplace, at least within these different places and within these separate allegations. Sony has kind of been clear of it, not entirely. There's been stuff that's come up, but it's generally been clear of it. This specific allegation is for Sony HQ. This one employee, the former employee, named Emily Majo or Mao.
Mayo?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Spelled M-A-J-O.
Yeah. Former business analyst at PlayStation HQ. This is in California. This doesn't necessarily reflect on any of the studios, but it's like Sony corporate that this is addressing specifically. I can't say to anything about Sony Studios. I don't know what the work environments are there, but my best guess is that each studio has its own leadership, and each leadership probably handles its studio differently. So it's unclear exactly what the state of things are at the specific studios. I don't know any like specific allegations for like say Sony Santa Monica or anything like that. So this is specific Sony HQ in California. Emily had filed a lawsuit that was dismissed in April, saying that there wasn't enough supporting evidence. However, she came back and filed this month, and this is why I think people found out about it, on a news suit that takes the sort of ruling that came out of the court from the April and is addressing the specific complaint so that she can try to move forward with a new suit that will actually be successful. This suit claims that PlayStation supports systemic gender discrimination in its offices and affects women within the organization. And it's women broadly, people who identify as women one way or another. The discrimination includes wage disparities, which were specifically pointed out.
Yeah.
And the original suit sought compensation for back pay, the compensation discrepancies, benefits, and then emotional distress.
Mm-hmm. And since that the original filing, part of the reason this was reopened, so there were two things that they got to modify. That Emily and her team of lawyers, her representation, and the suit itself, that the documents they had to file had to have basically two things happen in order to get them to be accepted by the court. One of them was that the court deemed, I think, either directly or at a sort of a response from Sony on this, that it was too broad and did not have backing of any. This is the one from last year, November.
Right.
It was missing details and backup like data effectively, and it was way too broad. They're like, this applies too broadly. So they brought it back, and then what they have gone forth with now is they narrowed the scope to not include anyone above vice president level.
Yep.
At the corporate employment tiers. The other thing that they did is they got some number. I am blanking on the number right now. Eight
women, came forward.
Eight more women came forward with similar stories of discrimination or other, examples of harassment or discrimination or both, and became part of what is now the class action suit. And this is just adding. We don't know many of the details. Apparently, some of the stuff have been including. One employee was asked. One of the women in the suit was asked apparently to not wear a dress, or excuse me, a skirt, because it made one of the men feel uncomfortable or something. I don't remember the exact language. I think it was similar to that. And then apparently another comment that came out was that several employees would share around disturbing or other types of images of women, a lot of them from 4chan boards, to give you a sense of the type of image we're talking about here. And alternatively, there was apparently a group of male employees would also take their lunch break to go to, it sounded like together, to a strip club during lunch. And so there are these experiences that are put forth in these allegations. We have zero insight on this ourselves. We are not part of Sony.
Yeah.
We're looking at it from the outside, and it's just to us an unfortunate angle of something that's coming out of the game industry.
Right. And I should say that because it was dismissed in April, doesn't mean that there was a lack of evidence. Period. There's a lack of evidence that supported the broader case.
Right.
So the move to narrow it down and sort of focus more of the specific allegations with the evidence that they have means that they may have a more successful go at this. But again, it's unclear. I think it's just another example of unfortunate report on conduct within the game industry and how badly there's a need for the game industry to sort of clean house and make it more inclusive of the sort of gamer body that supports it. Gamers are diverse, even though there may be some parts of the gaming group or gaming consumers that would like to think otherwise, but it's extremely diverse, and we need the studios and organizations that support gaming to reflect that and not make horrible working environments for people, whether or not it is true or not.
Yep. And we're here to, as game industry folks ourselves, we are more than happy to signal boost this kind of thing, as we see this as leading to positive change in the industry.
Yeah.
Where these things that come out, they're difficult to hear. It's difficult to hear that your coworkers or co-industry people have had to
your
put
favorite
up with
brands for that matter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but both Justin and I are very big fans of Sony. We're big fans of basically all the major companies, but I mean, in this case, we're fans of Sony, and it's disheartening to hear that you look at it on the outside and it's like finding out this dirty laundry, in the closet, and you're like, I don't want to. Why? But
you hope it's not true. But if it turns out that this case turns out to be accurate, that you hope that Sony does the right thing and
that's right,
and cleans house and sort of sets real goals and real changes within their company to address this, and not in superficial ways as we've seen, in cases of Ubisoft, where allegations are leveled at it, they pushed for changes, and then shortly after those changes were supposed to go in place, people were like, it was effectively nothing, and we're still dealing with the same problems.
It was marketing,
right?
It was all just marketing. So that's the thing we are also upset about when we hear, as folks in the industry, that it is shame on us and our industry to have that type of thing come out, any of this stuff.
And we should demand better from the companies we enjoy or support with our dollars.
Yep, agreed. And so we're doing our part.
Yes. All right. Well, let's move on to the last long subject, which again is in periphery to what this is. You want to cover this one, Eric?
Yeah, sure. So despite their best efforts. Despite Activision's best efforts, Activision Blizzard specifically, Ravensoft's QA team has voted to form a why am I blanking on the word?
Union.
Thank you, union.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like some other term was coming to mind, and it was totally wrong. Yeah, a union. They voted to form a union, and I think it's the first American game studio that has a union now, union representation.
There actually was another company that technically had it, but the company formed with the union.
I see.
So it's basically the company formed as a collective and within that collective it was a union, a formal union. So like it was formed with a formal union in it. This is the first time a company that did not have any formal unions
now has a union.
Now has one,
Yeah.
in part as a result for its lack of great working environment.
Yeah. So the history of this is a bit wild.
Yeah.
You know, there was a strike at Ravensoft from the QA department in early 2022.
Actually broader too. It wasn't just the QA department, but the QA department specifically was part of it as well.
Yeah. And you know, following the harassment and sexual misconduct report that came out again earlier this year, right? Or was it last year? I don't even remember. But Activision.
Yeah, there's stuff coming out late last year. Well, late last year was a lot of it, and I think there's been progressive things changing. I think the earliest stuff was like about this time last year.
Right. And yeah, so we've been sort of seeing this come and ebb and flow for a while. But effectively, you know, Ravensoft's QA team was subject to very long crunch hours, as happens in the game industry. This should surprise nobody that there is long crunch. What is potentially surprising is that it's still going on, even though there were huge lawsuits in like California 2 decades ago for this type of thing. But those, to be clear, those were also specifically for the employed, right? The EA spouse lawsuits were for people who were salaried positions not getting paid for the hours that they were working.
For the overtime hours, yeah.
Right, because they were working 100 hours and still making the same amount of money as they would if they just worked 40.
Right.
And so the spouses were suing and saying, like, you're holding our husbands and wives hostage, our spouses hostage, and saying if you don't come in on Saturday, don't come in on Sunday or Monday because you won't have a job anymore. And so it was like really unfortunate practices. They're based in California, so they had a bunch of stuff going on. Ravensoft and QA departments in general tend to be more contract workers, so they are not subject to the same type of protections as salaried employees. They're as contract workers, they have limited hours or in specific schedules that are paid hourly instead of for you just make a salary, right? And different states have different rules around what you can and can't do with this. As part of the mitigation effort, once Ravensoft's QA team said, "Hey, we're looking to unionize," Activision had several things change about how they employed their people that had nothing to do with the unionization efforts. They just
so they say, yeah, right.
So they say, allegedly.
The official line is it has absolutely nothing to do with unionization efforts. It just happens to coincide with unionization efforts at Ravensoft.
Right. And these efforts included things like, we are reorganizing the team to break up the QA team and embed them in the specific teams. We are going to bring in some of these part-time employees, give them large pay increases, give them access to benefits, and pay time off. And I think some of them they were just going to straight up pull into full-time employment.
Yes, they moved a lot of them this is to Activision QA teams in general, but not specifically to the Ravensoft QA team. Because it would break a law about what you can do with
meddling with
unionization efforts. So instead, it's just like saying basically, well, if you weren't a union, here's what you could. And that's how people are perceiving it.
That's right.
Their official line is it has absolutely nothing to do with it. It's a move across a broader Activision group to bring QA more in line with full-time salaried employees to support their, their perpetual ongoing
development.
software development, which they've been doing for years now. I think the only real change is like World at War, or not World at War. What is it? Warzone. Call of Duty Warzone, which is like a what do they call those? MOBA.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But I mean, even before that, they had World of Warcraft and other games that were perpetual like this, and they're saying now is the time to do it because of games like Warzone, where they need ongoing support, opposed to before when they'd release, 30 titles a year and they didn't need QA full time for some reason.
Perpetual games as a service, where they're like, well, how do you not just have a full time QA staff that's constantly providing bugs? You're constantly updating and constantly fixing things. Like, how do you not have a full time QA team?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't know the internal structure. We don't know the internal conversations. This could have all been in the plans since 2021, and the timing just sucked for them, which is too bad. To be benefit of the doubty here, but the timing.
Yeah, there are real reasons they could be doing it. It's just aligns with the unionization efforts.
I mean, part of this is like, if the company was already operating at this thing and it was being successful with the way that it was, why would they? You look at it and say, like, what is their purpose for giving people more money? I mean, perhaps there was some initiative where they said, hey, look, if we pay our teams more, we'll get better work out of them. Like, maybe that would. I'm a little bit hesitant to suggest that would be the case. Like, maybe it was, but generally the way things go in business is you try to like not spend more money.
Right, especially when you're taking like 1,000 different QA folks you have across studios and giving large sums of them full-time employment and access to benefits and whatever else. Like that move is going to be costly for Activision, so why would they do it if they didn't have to?
Yep. Yeah. And so keep in mind, background is what's going on here during this time. They're in talks with Microsoft to be bought out. Yes. So this could be a way for them to basically say, like, look, we're going to bring them on. It'll be Microsoft's problem once they're on in, a number of months or a year or so, when all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. But this also would sort of mitigate the potential for the other studios to have the same unionization effort occur. Right. That's sort of the lens that people are seeing this through, given what is understood about the company at the time.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of this stuff going on. And Justin, how did it go down? How did the union sort of be?
Yeah. Well, so what had happened is, I think it was earlier this year. There's a team of 30 QA, and they had overwhelmingly and majority opted to unionize shortly after one of their walkouts. Activision combated it by basically saying, you can't do this. We have to open up to it. It wouldn't be fair for a union to be formed within the larger studio. We should open it up into the 230 workers
employees
at the studio, and they will have to vote for unionization. And that was their kind of contest to it, to say, like, the 30 supermajority vote that you got, or like whatever it was, the 30 QA people with the supermajority voting for the union was not going to cut it. So it sort of slowed down everything, and it looked like it was going to have to go to the wider company to decide whether or not the studio was going to unionize as a whole. But it looks like they were able to circumvent that, challenge it separately. They were able to cast a vote in April and send it directly to the NLRB, which is the
National
Labor
Relationship.
Yeah, which is a federal level group within the U.S. government that oversees these things. They submitted independently in April, which I think there was 24 of the 30 people voted, and of those 24 people, 19 voted in favor of unionization. It looked like on Monday the NLRB approved it, And so it looks like with NLRB's approval, there actually is a union, and the union they're calling themselves now is what is it called? The
Ravensoft QA Game Workers Alliance Union.
Yeah, Game Workers Alliance Union as their official union title.
Because it wasn't Game Workers Alliance a separate body outside of them? Wasn't there like they were getting assistance from a pre-existing organization?
There was a pre-existing organization, and they were getting help from a separate union that was not game related. It was the communication. I'm going to blank on it. It's like the Communication Workers Alliance.
Oh yeah.
CWA.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So this is. It should be big news if they actually can form a union. They're going to be able to set the terms in which they're employed by Activision, and I think game unions are probably a long time coming and are likely to see a wider spread of it, along with a national move to unionize in a lot of places, like the New York Starbucks did. I think it was also New York that they had the Amazon union formed. There's a wider effort across a bunch of Starbucks stores where there's unionization, like baristas unionizing. So this may trigger a kind of a change that we'll see across the industry, both within like QA groups, if not engineering groups and the like, also demanding better work quality. And I think with this news, there was Kerwood Studios BC, British Columbia, which is, I guess, another studio and outsourcing house that has helped BioWare on some of their games. They're pushing to unionize, but they're Canadian, so it's going to be up to Canadian unionization rules.
Right. And just a note, CWA stands for the Communications Workers of America.
Yeah, that's what it is, yeah. And the other thing that's worth noting is if these unions succeed and become more powerful, then what usually happens is those unions will help efforts of other unions to start and succeed. So you tend to start seeing this sort of snowball effect, and with more and more drastic measures by companies trying to stymie the unionization efforts. But it's something worth talking about because I think we're likely to see more of it happen within the game industry.
Yep.
You have any other thoughts on this, Eric?
Not especially. I mean, I think good for them is what I would say. The games industry is very tough. It's a very hard industry, and it takes a lot of grit. And when QA in particular gets the shaft a lot, they get the short end of the stick in many ways, and hopefully this will result in improvements for those employees.
Right. And I'll also say that not only is the game development space tough, but the pay tends to be not very competitive across the board. People tend to do work at these companies as a labor of love, so having unions represent larger groups of people means we might be able to see more competitive pay within the game industry, hopefully improvements for the people who make the content that we love to play. So it should be interesting to see how this proceeds over the next year or so, if there's more unions that look to be emerging from other companies.
We will see. Time will tell. All right, so shall we shift over to our final little tidbit?
Yeah, go for it, because you sent me the tweet, so I think
our super bonus tidbit.
Yeah.
So apparently this is like hot off the presses today, as far as I'm aware. I just came up in a Slack that I am in, and basically it looks like TCL, a company that makes television sets. I think you see them a lot you see them a lot at like Walmart, I think, maybe Best Buy, in the States at least. They had a presentation apparently earlier today, and a Polish reporter was able to take a couple pictures of it and basically put it into an article, and this article was in a tweet with a just the photos and some suggestions on it. And basically, in the photo, it shows the history of the console generations. It shows Generation 8, PS4, Xbox One. Then it shows 8.5, which was the console refresh cycle for them, the PS Pro and the Xbox One X and Xbox One S. And then it shows Generation 9, PS5, Xbox One X, Xbox Series X and Series S. And then it shows 9.5. And it has a bunch of information in there. And people are looking at this picture and saying, oh my goodness, like here's an announcement of like the first announcement of the next generation of consoles from a hardware insider. And I think so we went ahead and used good old-fashioned Google Translate to translate the article that was linked. And it makes no reference to what was actually said during that slide.
Yeah.
And by the way, some of the details on that, Justin, do you have those at hand? I don't remember off the top of my head.
I mean, the details, I guess, from the whole report was Tom Henderson reported this in a tweet showing the TCL slide. The slide itself claims that Gen 9.5 is coming in 2023-24.
Yeah.
2023-24, where we'll see a new Xbox Series SX, a PS5 Pro. And these will be capable. They'll be equivalent to an RX 7700.
XT, yeah.
XT, yeah. It will be capable of doing 2160p output at 60 to 120 frames per second, and UHD 8K at 60 to 120 output. And so, yeah, people are running with this and being like, this is confirmation that there will definitely be a refresh next year.
Yeah, some people are getting really excited. There still might be, but what we're trying to throw some cold water on everybody here and suggest is that this is probably TCL giving a report on looking at market trends and saying the games industry has had this march of progress, and there's no reason for us to believe that there won't be a mid-cycle refresh because they did it the last time. It was 4 years after the original generation hardware came out. We're very likely to see that happen, and it will probably, just like last time, include rendering improvement, which is relevant to us because we are a TV manufacturer who is looking to get into 8K televisions, and higher resolution stuff or refresh rates. So, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the cold water on this is there's no reason to believe TCL should have any inside knowledge about what Sony or Xbox is doing in terms of redesigning silicon to put in some future hardware.
If this came from, for instance, if this was a slide where the person talking was a representative from AMD who makes the GPU in those machines, like that, okay, maybe now we have something to talk about.
Right. This is TCL, who is, like you said, is trying to sell 8K TVs and trying to create reasons for why 8K TVs will be the next big thing in television technology, when in reality, we're scratching to get 4K content in general. So I don't know why we're right on the precipice of 8K content. Not only that, but we've already PlayStation and Xbox have already claimed that 8K content is possible, which I'm sure it is. But this every 2-year march to get even faster performance out of things does not align with the change in hardware performance out of console rendering hardware. It does not match that at all.
Yeah.
So
you might be, there are things like, I would suspect that, I mean, we might get things like that, or it's now possible to do 8K with a meaningful game rather than, a 30 hertz.
Or 30 frames per second 8K on a meaningful game, or, 8K upscale that, there's
from 1440p or something like that, yeah.
Now, the things that I guess will turn up the temperature a little bit is that there are clearly positions that both Xbox and PlayStation are taking that there is going to be some sort of chip redesign soon. Microsoft has already stated that they want to move to TSMC but three, no,
Some
they're on
smaller
7 nanometer process now. I think they want to move down to 5 or 3.
Right.
So which will help with heat and die size.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a good reason for both consoles to want to make their die size smaller, with or without a console, refresh. But basically, they have to re-architect the chip on either side if they're going to, utilize a new fabrication method, which will result in a smaller die. And in both of those cases, like what would come out of it, like it's unclear. But there is good reason and a lot of market pressure to try to get more yields from a single piece of silicon because of the silicon shortages that is plaguing the industry and has been and will probably for the next year or so.
Right. There are the one thing I would suggest as well is that just shrinking a die doesn't necessarily mean you're getting the Pro edition of the PS5, right? Like you look back at the PlayStation 1, there were so many hardware iterations of that thing where the actual capabilities never changed, but the form factor got smaller. That was the case all the way up through PlayStation 3 era, right? Gen 7. The Gen 8 stuff is where we started to really see the mid-cycle capability improvements. And those came with the PS Pro on Sony's behalf because they were like, crap, we want to do VR and we can't really do it with our original PlayStation. Right. It doesn't have the beef. So, and then Microsoft sort of had its Xbox One X, but it was sort of the GPU was way overpowered compared to what they really needed in a refresh, and not many. It was basically a different class of machine. Right. It was sort of a weird.
Very
thing.
Strange. Yeah, the Scorpio hardware.
And
not only that, there's lots of reasons to believe that it was supposed to be brand new hardware, and they pumped the brakes on it when they realized Sony was not going to be matching them, and them doing a mid-gen refresh that
would mean Sony was come out later.
Yeah, it was bad strategic opportunity for them. So the Xbox One X hardware is actually very capable for what they were producing, but they never really utilized the hardware.
And if you recall back in the Xbox 360 days, people knew the names of the hardware refreshes, the internal motherboard reconfigurations, which also included changes to the CPU or adjustments and die downsizes and whatever, presumably. I don't know exactly, but that was a lot of it was Microsoft trying to figure out the Red Ring of Death problem, which they eventually did solve. But there were certain there were people. I myself was one of them who was trying to go into stores and be like, "What? Look at the box for the Xbox 360 and say, is this one that has the fix in it? Was this manufactured at a date after which I am guaranteed that I'm not going to be buying a Red Ring of Death susceptible model?" Right. And there was never a bump in speed in any of those machines, but they did have refreshes. So go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think the most likely thing that we're looking at, and there is reason to believe that they would be approaching this is, like you're saying, is like a shrink in die size, not in performance changes, so that they can get more silicon on a single wafer, so that they can get better yields. B, they can change their manufacturing process to be more effective if they can reduce the amount of heat output from the machine. So they don't have to be using. In the case of Xbox, they use a gas chamber for cooling, which is an expensive form of cooling, and then the PlayStation 5 uses liquid cooling, which is hard to manufacture and hard to assemble. Both of those, if they can get a cooler running chip, they may be able to mitigate that entirely and just go for more standard cooling
fans.
Fans with a big piece of copper.
Right, or even we've already seen a change from Sony on that front, right? And they had we did a section on that, in fact. But it was relatively minor. But the thing that's interesting here about that is that when you downsize, if you're able to downsize the CPU and downsize the amount of heat, you can shrink the enclosure and get the same performance and reduce the hardware. Justin was talking about removing, simplifying the cooling mechanisms. That also means a reduction of weight in particular and size, which means a reduction in shipping cost, which means that if Sony and Microsoft sell the consoles at the same price, it's just more profit. So there's a lot of reasons that they would want to go forward with that, even if it didn't mean a full re-architecture or, like an enhancement. There's a lot of reasons that they'd want to downsize, because they get more boxes into a pallet that's shipped. It costs them less because it's not as heavy, which means less fuel for the shipments from the shipping containers to cart. All of this in the supply chain,
right,
it affects their bottom line. So.
Yeah, I mean, and on top of that, like, both console manufacturers, well, less so with Xbox, more so with Sony, that they need to sell more consoles for the PlayStation games that they will be selling on them to be successful. Part of the way of dealing with this round was to have more games be cross-generation. At some point, we have to move away from that. And we're going to start seeing games that are specifically made for the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series XS. And when we're at that point, like, more than anything else, I need consoles in people's hands. And having a brand new model that's more performant and, is capable of doing more things like they did with the PS4 Pro, at a time when there are silicon shortages, making a box that's going to be more costly for them is going to run hotter. It doesn't solve a bunch of problems they're trying to solve right now. It just seems unlikely to be in the cards in the short term. It's still something that they could do. I could see them pursuing it for reasons of VR, but they have a brand new PlayStation VR headset that has its own piece of silicon in it.
And it hasn't shipped.
Right, that hasn't shipped yet. So it's like, I cannot see reasonably that in 2023 we would be getting a PlayStation 5 Pro. I think what's more likely is we might get a slimmed down version of it that's easier to manufacture and is cheaper to produce.
I would agree. I would also see that 2024, maybe 2025 is when we're going to, probably more like 2025 when we'd see a mid-grade cycle change. Now, the reason that I say that is partially because we're still supply constrained. There are people hungry to buy the existing PS5 now as it is. In terms of games, it still feels like we're sort of just starting Generation 9. Right. And by the time it'll be effectively 1 year. The reason that I say that is that most of the titles we've experienced thus far on the now current gen are cross-gen titles. They have not had the benefit of focused development where developers sit down with the consoles and say, here is my min spec. Here is what I am guaranteed this bar of hardware, and therefore let me see what I can push. We're just starting to potentially see, like, I would expect this summer we'll start to see games be announced. At it's like not E3 now.
Jedi Fallen Order 2, which I think was announced to be a new hardware only title. So, like, it hasn't even been announced. It has been announced, but we haven't seen any of the footage from it, which we're likely to see, I would assume, at this year's E3, whatever parallel it's going to be, the Summer Games Fest, or their own little announcement.
EA's press event, presser, I think EA was one of the companies that did their own.
They were EA, Ubisoft. There's going to be
Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft.
Have dates for even
So, going back to the tweet and the article, we suspect that this is just sort of TCL's own extrapolation and trying to just point out, like, where they're looking forwards to in their R&D to make sure that they're supporting what they foresee as the customer market in 2023 and 2024.
Meanwhile, their 8K TVs are probably competing with the silicon that needs to go into PlayStation anyway.
That's right. Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
It's like because an 8K TV running at 120 frames per second needs some pretty beefy
you need
hardware
a lot
inside of it. So
yes.
I think it's very wishful thinking. I think they're just being like, look, this is why an 8K TV is necessary. I think both PlayStation and Xbox would be crazy to push brand new hardware anytime before the supply constraint issues are resolved, which I think is, at least now, is predicted to go out into 2023, if not 2024, and that is still pending global recession. China getting backlash against it and leaving the international markets, like stuff like that we can't even predict we just know, as of right now, uh, COVID-related slowdowns and manufacturing interruptions are affecting things out into 2023 without any other major world events happening that could disrupt it as well.
Right. Yeah. So, it's an exciting thing. It's always fun to be like, oh my God, details. Like, we all love the details of the next thing, but we're barely starting out on this gen. I think give it some time.
Yeah.
That's my take on this.
All right. Well, I guess that covers us for this week. Like I said before, we are not going to be live. This did not stream live. Any of your comments will be responded to afterwards. But if you do like this content, please like and subscribe. It really helps us out. So we'll hope we catch you or you catch us or something like that on the next broadcast next Thursday. In the beginning of June, actually, at 6 p.m. Eastern Time when we usually stream live. Thanks, everybody.
Great. All right.
All right.
See you next time.
See you next time.